exploring self-reflection for personal growth and discovery. Introduction into the depths. There is a silence that echoes louder than any voice. It's the silence within, the hush between thoughts, the pause before action, the stillness behind the persona we project. Few dare to enter this silence. Fewer still return from it transformed. But you are not here to skim the surface. You are here to dive. This is not an audiobook about motivation or productivity hacks. It is not a cheerleader's chant for fleeting progress. Reflective Depths is a mirror, a map, and a method. It is a call to observe the contours of your inner landscape with a lens so clear it will confront you, comfort you, and ultimately reshape you. Every human being harbors a myth, a personal narrative whispered by the subconscious. Most live their lives bound by it, unaware that the myth was not written by them, but handed down, shaped by circumstance, repetition, avoidance. You are about to reclaim authorship of that myth. Self-reflection is not a luxury. It is not passive. It is a radical act of self-sovereignty. To know yourself is to free yourself from invisible chains, patterns, fears, compulsions, and inherited voices that steer your life from the shadows. The journey you're about to take is not linear. It spirals inward. Each chapter, each idea is another descent, another excavation of hidden truths. This work will not flatter you. It will challenge you. It will ask questions that do not yield to easy answers. It will offer no tidy formulas. Instead, it offers clarity, earned through honest confrontation. Do not mistake reflection for softness. It is not passive contemplation. It is warrior work. It is about standing in the storm of your own contradictions and choosing to see clearly rather than run. Each chapter will build upon the last, not as bricks laid in sequence, but as waves in motion, each one carving deeper understanding. The ultimate goal is not to become someone else, but to become fully, fiercely yourself. Real power is not control over others. It is dominion over the self. As you begin this audio journey, bring with you nothing but your willingness to look, to feel, and to question. Leave your expectations at the door. Prepare to unlearn, to uncover, and to evolve. Welcome to the depths. You are ready. Chapter 1. The mirror is not the self. We are taught early to identify ourselves by the visible name, occupation, heritage, accomplishments, likes, dislikes. These labels become a protective film wrapped tightly around our identity. Yet identity in its deepest form is not what we perform. It is what we hide. The danger lies in mistaking this external reflection for the truth. You may believe you know yourself. You may have repeated your story so many times that it feels like scripture. But pause. Consider this. What if the story you've clung to is merely a mask? What if your truth is a script written for survival rather than authenticity? We often construct ourselves in response to fear. Fear of rejection shapes our personality. Fear of failure sculpts our ambition. Fear of being unseen manifests in achievement. But these fears, silent architects of our character, are rarely acknowledged. They live in the shadows of self-perception. True reflection begins when we question the author of our self-image. Is your confidence real, or is it a camouflage for insecurity? Is your humility a virtue or a shield to avoid competition? The mind is a master manipulator. It crafts a version of you that is tolerable, not necessarily true. This process is uncomfortable. It requires ruthless honesty. You must learn to interrogate yourself with the same intensity you reserve for others. You must ask not just who you are, but who taught you to be this way. Was it your environment, your caregivers, The culture that applauded obedience but punished authenticity. To see clearly, you must unlearn. Peel back the layers, not with judgment, but with curiosity. This is not an act of demolition, but of excavation. Beneath the social masks and conditioned behaviors lies a self untouched by narrative, a self that simply is. Begin with stillness. Remove the noise. Turn off the devices. Step away from performance. Let the raw material of your mind surface. What thoughts arise in silence? What feelings demand attention when distraction is stripped away? You will notice the discomfort. That is the point. Discomfort is not a signal to retreat. It is a compass pointing towards something real. The deeper you go, the more illusions you dissolve. Reflection, when done with integrity, does not affirm you. It reveals you. And in this revelation, you are reborn, not into someone new, but into someone finally seen. This is your task for now. Challenge the face in the mirror, not to destroy it, but to see beyond it. Strip away the performance. Stand unguarded in your own presence. This is the first step, the beginning of real power. The mirror shows you what is most familiar, but it hides what is most essential. You look and you recognize a face, a posture, a mood. But what you recognize is not necessarily what is real. Recognition is based on repetition, not truth. Behind what you recognize is a vast terrain of unexamined territory. Every time you said yes, when you meant no, you buried a piece of yourself. Every time you silenced your instincts to maintain peace, you turned away from your own voice. Over time, this accumulation of betrayals becomes internalized. It becomes identity. Many people live this way, animated by obligations, social codes, and the pursuit of an image that makes them feel safe, accepted, or admired. But in private moments, something surfaces, a question, a discomfort, a flicker of unrest. Is this really me? That is your inner signal, weak from neglect but potent with truth, trying to be heard. There is a price for denying yourself, and that price is clarity. When you can no longer distinguish between what you truly want and what you've been conditioned to want, your power dissolves. You operate not from agency, but from programming. And worse, you begin to confuse coping mechanisms for personality traits. Consider how often you've been rewarded for being agreeable, efficient, productive, likable. These rewards are external validations, addictive, yes, but they come at a cost. You begin to derive your sense of worth from their presence, and when they vanish, you're left unsure of who remains. This confusion isn't failure, it's opportunity, because clarity begins when confusion is named. When you can say, I don't know who I am beneath all of this, you're closer to truth than someone who never stops to question. You're pulling away from the surface and reaching for substance. So ask yourself, what parts of your identity feel heavy, forced, convenient, whose voice echoes in your decisions, whose expectations live behind your goals. This is not about assigning blame, it is about reclaiming authorship. You are not here to destroy what you've built, but to realign it with your essence. That essence will not shout, it will not demand attention, it will whisper. You must become quiet enough to hear it. Practice noticing the difference between a reaction and a response. A reaction comes from the past, from wounds, reflexes, scripts. A response is rooted in awareness. It's slower, calmer, anchored. When you live in reaction, your life becomes a series of echoes. When you respond, you begin to live in original voice. This chapter is not about answers. It is about beginning to ask better questions. It's about standing still long enough for your deeper self to catch up to you, because it always does, if you let it. Keep listening. The silence you fear is the gate you must walk through. Reflection, real reflection, is a disruption. It interrupts the autopilot of your daily roles. It forces you to sit not just with your dreams but with your contradictions, your hypocrisies, your avoidance, your fear of being seen without the armor. You begin to notice the dissonance in your own speech. How often you say, "I'm fine," while internally unraveling. How often you pursue goals that no longer hold meaning, simply because they are familiar. You become aware of your own mimicry, adopting values that were never yours, speaking in tones borrowed from others, trying to belong in rooms where you feel like a stranger to yourself. This awareness is not comfortable, it's disorienting, but it's also sacred. You are standing at a threshold. On one side is the persona you've curated, the efficient self, the polite self, the ambitious self. These roles have served you. They helped you navigate systems and survive experiences that might have otherwise broken you. They are not your enemy, but they are not your entirety. On the other side is the undefined self, the one not shaped by approval, the one not bound by scripts, the one waiting to emerge, not because you discovered something new but because you remembered something ancient. This part of you does not demand a name. It does not need validation. It does not conform. It simply is. It has always been, and it is this self you must begin to nurture, gently, patiently, without urgency. To do that you must cultivate stillness, not as a technique, but as a ritual. 10 minutes of intentional silence can reveal more than 10 hours of analysis. In stillness, the masks fall, the noise recedes, and what remains is your essence, unfiltered, unafraid. Start small. Practice observing your thoughts without attachment. Watch them arrive. Watch them pass. Do not intervene. Do not identify. Simply notice. What patterns appear? What narratives keep repeating? Who benefits from those stories being true? You are not here to erase your history. You are here to reclaim your authorship. You are not here to abandon your past. You are here to integrate it with new awareness. As this chapter closes, understand this self-reflection is not a destination. It is a discipline, a constant return to the core, especially when life pulls you away from it. The mirror will always reflect what stands before it. But it is not the final judge. You are. And now, you are ready to begin shaping a reflection aligned with truth, not performance. In the next chapter we begin that shaping, not by constructing, but by uncovering. Not by striving, but by releasing. We step into the act of conscious reconstruction. The first step, detaching from the expectations that no longer serve your evolution. Chapter 2. Unlearning the script. Before you can write the next chapter of your life with clarity, you must confront the script that has been running without your permission. This script is not yours. It was written long before you had the tools to question it. It's in the way you apologize for existing too loudly, the way you tense when someone raises their voice, the way you chase achievements like lifeboats in a sea of doubt. This script lives in your nervous system, in your micro-decisions, in your quietest thoughts. Most people live their entire lives as actors in a play they didn't audition for, reciting lines they never wrote. They perform good child, loyal partner, resilient worker, not because these roles align with their essence, but because they were taught those roles are necessary to survive, to belong, to be loved. But you are not most people. You are here to unlearn. Unlearning is not erasure, it is excavation. It is digging through the architecture of your mind to find which bricks were placed with care and which were hastily cemented by fear, guilt, or compliance. It is discovering how many of your decisions are reactions to pain rather than expressions of truth. Start by noticing what beliefs show up most often. The ones that whisper, "You're not enough, you must earn love. If you stop, you'll fall behind." These are not inner truths. They are echoes, traces of conditioning handed down like heirlooms, unquestioned, inherited, damaging. Ask yourself, who taught me this? Trace the voice. Was it a parent, a teacher, a lover, a culture? And then ask the harder question, is it true? Not was it true then, but is it true now? Unlearning requires stillness, but also boldness. It means sitting with the discomfort of ambiguity. It means releasing the black and white rules that once made you feel safe. It means allowing space for new possibilities that aren't defined by old pain. You will encounter resistance. Your mind is wired for preservation, not transformation. The known, even if it is harmful, feels safer than the unknown. You will be tempted to return to the script because it's memorized, predictable, easy. But ease is not always aligned with growth. The script may have served you once. It may have protected you, but protection is not the same as peace. Now you are capable of choosing your truth over your programming. Now you are strong enough to sit in uncertainty without collapsing. This is the work of personal sovereignty. It is not glamorous. It will not always be praised. But it is real. It is freedom in its rawest form. And once you begin unlearning, you begin creating space for new truths, for your voice, for your life. Conditioning is subtle. It rarely announces itself. Instead, it disguises as instinct, as logic, as the way things are. It wraps itself in language that sounds rational. This is just how life works. People like us don't do that. You're being unrealistic. These phrases are not facts. They are scripts, written by fear and reinforced through repetition. You must understand this. The systems you internalized were designed for conformity, not authenticity. School trained you to memorize rather than inquire. Work taught you to obey structure over intuition. Relationships mirrored what you tolerated, not what you needed. These experiences weren't malicious, but they were mechanical. And what is mechanical does not nourish the soul. To unlearn is to interrupt the automation of your choices. It is to step back from the wheel of reflex and ask, am I choosing this, or was this chosen for me long ago? One of the most powerful tools in this process is pattern recognition. Patterns are the footprints of belief. When you find yourself in the same emotional spiral, the same type of relationship, the same argument with different people, that's not coincidence, it's programming. Begin tracking these patterns, write them down, observe their texture, their rhythm. Ask what belief is holding this pattern in place. You may find beliefs like, I have to prove my worth. People always leave. I'm safest when I'm invisible. These are not truths. They are coping mechanisms. They once helped you survive. But you are no longer surviving. You are evolving. This evolution requires a different strategy, not control, not suppression, but awareness. Detachment is not indifference. It is discernment. It is stepping back far enough to see the machinery behind the moment. When you detach, you reclaim your power to choose, not from fear, but from alignment. Try this the next time you feel triggered or reactive. Pause, name the emotion. Track it to its source. Ask, is this response based on present reality or past experience? Often, you will find the present is being colored by a past wound. Your nervous system is reacting to a memory, not a moment. This awareness creates a gap, and in that gap you find choice. That's where the unlearning begins, not through force but through clarity. You are not here to become neutral. You are here to become intentional. Unlearning is not about becoming blank. It's about creating space for truth to land. As the old script begins to lose its grip, you will feel disoriented. That's natural. When the familiar narrative dissolves, your identity will feel porous. You may question everything. That's good. It means the story is breaking, and where there are cracks, light can enter. Let the light in. Even if it blinds you at first, you will not walk away from this process untouched. Unlearning strips you of comfortable illusions. It empties your hands. And yet in this emptiness there is power, because only with empty hands can you grasp what is truly yours. The voices that once guided you, those of culture, family, mentors, will begin to sound different. Not evil, not wrong. Simply not yours. You'll hear their echoes but no longer mistake them for inner truth. You'll begin to distinguish between what aligns and what conforms, between resonance and obedience. This new awareness is fragile at first. Like a sprouting seed, it requires protection. You will be tempted to explain yourself, to justify your shifting identity to those who remain inside the script. Don't. You owe no one an explanation for your liberation. Not everyone will understand your shift. They may interpret your silence as distance, your boundaries as arrogance, your clarity as rebellion. Let them. You are not responsible for their projections. You are only responsible for your alignment. And alignment is not about being right. It's about being real. To live aligned is to risk disapproval. It is to speak without editing yourself for comfort. It is to say no without apology. Yes, without over-justification, and I don't know without shame. This is where authenticity is forged, in the space where old roles decay and the true self begins to emerge. This emerging self does not come with a script. It does not fit neatly into expectations. It asks deeper questions. It moves slower, thinks longer, listens harder. It chooses with intention, not urgency. It is not afraid of silence. It trusts the pauses. Give yourself permission to not know what comes next. Let uncertainty be your teacher. When the old frameworks fall, do not rush to replace them. Rest in the openness. In that space something raw and honest will begin to form, not from pressure, but from presence. The journey of unlearning is not linear. It is cyclical. Some patterns will reappear. Some voices will grow louder before they fade. That's okay. You are not failing. You are deepening. And with each return to awareness, each conscious detachment, you reclaim another piece of yourself. What you are unlearning is not your past. It is your limits. And what you are remembering is not some future ideal. It is your origin. Who you were before the world told you who to be. In the next chapter, we move from release to reconstruction. We begin to shape a life that reflects not what you've been handed, but what you now choose. No longer reactive, no longer rehearsed, but real. Chapter 3. Building from the core. Once you've dismantled the script, there's a strange kind of silence, an openness. You've torn down the scaffolding that once held your identity together, and now the question rises, what do I build in its place? The answer begins not with ambition, but with alignment. True rebuilding does not begin at the surface. It begins at the core, and your core is not made of goals or titles or preferences. It is shaped by principles, by values so deep they persist even when everything else falls away. To find your core, begin by asking, what remains when I remove performance? When I stop trying to be impressive, agreeable, productive, what is left? That voice beneath the noise, that's where you begin. Do not rush into reinvention. Reinvention without reflection is just another costume. This time, You are not constructing an identity to be seen. You are constructing one to be lived. So start simple. Identify your non-negotiables. Not what you wish were true about yourself, but what is actually true when you're alone, when you're honest, when no one is watching. Perhaps you value clarity more than comfort, integrity more than approval, freedom more than security. These are not preferences, they are coordinates. They help you navigate through the fog. Once you name them, test them. Align your actions with these values. Not occasionally, not when convenient, but consistently. Make decisions that reflect them. Speak in ways that protect them. Build relationships that honor them. That is how you construct from the core. This rebuilding process will be subtle at first. You might not even notice the changes as they happen, but you'll start to feel different. Lighter, sharper, more at ease in your own skin. And that ease is not laziness. It is the absence of internal war. When your internal world becomes coherent, your external life begins to follow. You no longer chase validation because your foundation doesn't require it. You stop negotiating your worth in conversations. You stop performing and start embodying. This embodiment is powerful. Quietly, it begins to restructure your environment. People treat you differently, not because you demand it, but because you no longer tolerate misalignment. The energy shifts, the standards rise. You stop engaging in battles that don't matter. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. Your attention becomes sacred. Your presence becomes precise. And your life becomes a mirror of your truth. This isn't perfection, it's authenticity. There will still be doubt, discomfort, and contradiction, but now they will be signals, not roadblocks. You will learn to navigate them with grace because your direction is internal, not external. And in this quiet, steady reconstruction, you begin to feel it. You are no longer becoming someone else. You are becoming fully yourself. The world will not congratulate you for choosing integrity. It will rarely reward your alignment with fanfare. In fact, choosing to live from your core may make you less likable to some, more difficult to manage, less predictable. But this discomfort is a price worth paying, for it is the cost of being real. There is a quiet rebellion in choosing values over validation. Every time you make a choice that honors your truth rather than your image, you carve a path that didn't exist before. This is not a loud rebellion. It is subtle. It happens in small, decisive moments, saying no without guilt, ending conversations that drain you, showing up when you'd rather disappear, holding your word even when no one is checking. These are the moments that define a core-built life. Do not underestimate the power of these decisions. Chapter 4. The drift. The greatest threat to your growth is not the obvious crisis. It is not the collapse that commands your full attention. It is the drift, the slow, quiet slide away from your center. It happens not in bold decisions, but in subtle concessions. You don't wake up one morning lost. You drift inch by inch, breath by breath. The drift begins when you say yes to what feels wrong, because it's easier than explaining your no. It deepens when you remain silent to keep the peace. When you sacrifice your rhythm to match someone else's pace. When you justify actions that shrink you. At first, it feels harmless. You tell yourself it's temporary, just this once, but compromise, when repeated unconsciously, becomes character. And before you realize it, you're living a life that resembles you less and less. The drift is seductive because it looks like connection. It looks like accommodation, cooperation, success. You are praised for your flexibility, your resilience, your ability to adapt. But adaptation without awareness is not strength, it's surrender. And the self you surrender is not returned. You start to notice it in small ways. Your body feels heavy, your sleep shallow, your laughter slightly forced. You're busy but disconnected, accomplishing but uninspired, present but not fully alive. These are not just symptoms, they are signals that your life is drifting away from your design. To course correct, you must develop sensitivity. You must tune into your discomfort before it becomes dysfunction. Pay attention to the subtle frictions, the tightening in your chest before a meeting, the drained feeling after certain conversations, the avoidance that follows a productive day. These are not flaws, they are feedback. They are your core attempting to speak through the noise. And the longer you ignore it, the louder it must get. What begins as a whisper becomes a scream, manifesting in burnout, conflict, anxiety, or apathy. Not because life is punishing you, but because life is trying to redirect you. That redirection begins the moment you decide to listen. To reverse the drift, you must first recognize where it began. Trace the trail of compromise. Was it a job you stayed in too long? A role you played too well? A truth you avoided because it would disrupt a fragile peace? Whatever it was, name it, gently, without judgment. And in naming it, reclaim your choice, because you always have a choice, even if you forgot it was yours. Drifting rarely feels dramatic. That's why it's so dangerous. It disguises itself as normalcy, as responsibility, as being a team player, a provider, a realist. The labels shift, but the pattern is constant. You shrink to fit the container you're handed, and each time you do, your inner world contracts just a little more. Over time, the erosion of self becomes routine. You wake up tired, not from lack of sleep, but from lack of connection. You go through the motions, replying, performing, producing, without a trace of presence. You convince yourself that fulfillment is a luxury, and survival is enough. But inside, something protests, quietly. At first, it's a whisper, then it becomes a restlessness, then a low-grade dissatisfaction that seeps into everything you do. You may try to numb it with productivity, consumption, or busyness, but the feeling persists. This isn't who I'm supposed to be. That sentence haunts people more than failure ever could, because failure can be useful. It teaches, clarifies, redirects. But drifting leaves no wreckage, only emptiness. And the most dangerous part, you don't notice how far you've gone until someone or something forces you to look up. Sometimes it's a conflict, sometimes it's a breakdown, sometimes it's just silence, an unbearable stillness that reveals how little of yourself remains in the life you've built. This moment, though painful, is sacred, because once you recognize the drift, you regain agency. You remember that the direction of your life is not fixed. It's not something happening to you. It is something shaped, moment by moment, by what you choose to allow, reject, protect, and pursue. Awareness is the first act of resistance. It doesn't require you to burn everything down. It simply asks you to pause, to feel, to reflect, to reconnect with what matters before you agree to what doesn't. This is how you begin to reclaim your direction, not through dramatic change, but through deliberate attention. Attention is the antidote to drift. The more you attune to what energizes you, what grounds you, what feels true, you begin to draw a new internal map. One not built by obligation or imitation, but by clarity. You stop outsourcing your identity to your environment. You begin to shape the environment around your identity. This shift doesn't look heroic from the outside, but internally it's a revolution. Every time you say this doesn't feel right and choose differently, you pull yourself back from the edge. Every time you pause before a reflexive yes, every time you turn towards stillness instead of noise, you correct your course. And over time these small corrections become a way of living, a life that no longer drifts but moves, intentionally inwardly aligned, outwardly free. To return to yourself is not a grand gesture. It is not a speech or an announcement, or a flawless plan. It is a small decision made repeatedly in silence, a subtle reorientation, a quiet refusal to continue betraying your core for comfort. This is how the drift is reversed, not all at once but in increments. You begin by noticing the places where you disappear, the conversations where you nod along to stay polite, the tasks you take on to feel needed, the relationships you remain in because they're familiar. These moments are not minor. They are clues, and when you start paying attention, a pattern emerges. You've been taught that sacrifice is noble, that selflessness is virtue, but there is a line where giving becomes erasure. And when that line is crossed enough times, you forget what your own needs sound like, what your own desires feel like, what it means to want something without filtering it through the lens of acceptability. Reconnecting with yourself is the act of remembering. Remembering what lights you up, what calms you down, what sparks your curiosity. It is remembering your voice when it's not being edited, your pace when it's not being rushed, your thoughts when they're not being drowned. And remembering isn't nostalgia, it's resurrection. Piece by piece you gather yourself, not to become the person you were before the drift, but to become the person you were always meant to be before compromise made you forget. This self is not a performance. It is not curated for approval. It is not waiting to be liked. It is enough, simply because it's true. Living from this place will change things. You may outgrow people, environments, even dreams you once clung to. And it will hurt. Letting go always does. But the pain of alignment is cleaner than the numbness of pretending. It is honest. It is necessary. It is sacred. Let the drift teach you. Let it show you where you overextend, where you seek validation, where you trade your truth for belonging. Then begin to choose differently. Choose slowness over urgency, solitude over noise, integrity over image. This is the way back, not to what you were but to what you are beneath the noise. This is your compass recalibrating, your spirit reorienting, your life turning gently, steadily, toward what's real. And in the next chapter you'll begin to act from that place, not just internally, but externally, because reflection without movement becomes stagnation. It's time to learn the art of aligned action, the practice of making decisions that reflect the truth you've worked so hard to uncover. The drift brought you back to yourself. Now you begin again, on purpose. Chapter 5. The Power of Aligned Action. Clarity without action is a stalled engine. It hums with potential but never moves. You can reflect, analyze, and uncover your truth, but until it shapes the way you live, it remains dormant. Power is not just knowing who you are. Power is choosing in alignment with that truth when it matters most. Aligned action is not about being busy. It's not about productivity. It's not about doing more. It's about doing what matters and only what matters. It's about choosing what nourishes, not just what performs. When you begin acting from your core, everything changes. You say no without a rehearsed explanation. You pursue goals that might confuse others, but feel coherent to you. You stop abandoning your energy to appease everyone around you, and most importantly, you start feeling real, every decision echoing a deeper yes from within. The power in this is not always visible. From the outside, your life might look quieter, simpler, less flashy, but inside there's peace, there's traction, There's movement that feels like growth instead of effort. To live this way requires a kind of courage that doesn't get applauded. The courage to pause when the world rushes. The courage to choose differently even when you can't fully explain why. The courage to disappoint others so you don't have to disappoint yourself. You must be willing to walk through the awkwardness that comes with realignment. The pauses in conversation when you set new boundaries. The resistance from those who benefited from your former compliance. The doubt that creeps in when your choices don't deliver immediate rewards, but stay the course. Each aligned action reinforces your self-trust. You begin to feel yourself solidify. You begin to believe, not in a future promise, but in your present truth. Your intuition becomes sharper, your voice steadier, and your decisions, no matter how small, begin to carry weight. The power of aligned action is this: it makes your life your own. Not a reaction to someone else's path. Not a patchwork of expectations, but a reflection of who you are, where you are, right now. Start small. You don't need a grand transformation. You need one clear choice that reflects what you've discovered about yourself. Then another, and another. Let them compound. Let them rewire how you relate to your time, your work, your relationships. Your external world will start to shift, sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once. And when it does, you'll recognize something profound. You're not just living, you're leading. Not others, yourself. Your attention, your energy, your presence, guided not by habit, but by alignment. And that is the beginning of true momentum. The most transformative decisions often look insignificant at the time. Not the grand leaps, but the subtle pivots. Not quitting your job, but choosing to leave work on time. Not cutting ties, but speaking your truth with precision. These are the quiet acts of self-loyalty that begin to shift the axis of your entire life. Because the truth is, every action teaches the world how to treat you, and teaches you how to treat yourself. If you continually override your own boundaries, you begin to believe that your needs are negotiable. If you chronically say yes when you mean no, your self-trust fractures. But when you act in alignment, no matter how small the gesture, you send a clear message inward. I matter. My truth matters. My presence matters. And those messages compound. You become a person who doesn't just know what matters, you embody it. You become someone others feel, not just someone they listen to. The congruence between your words and actions creates a frequency that is unmistakable. It's not forceful, it's grounded, calm, solid. That's the energy of aligned action, not performative, not reactive, but deeply rooted. You'll begin to notice how this energy reorders your life. Opportunities that once drained you will lose their appeal. Conversations that once triggered you will no longer hook you. Relationships that once required performance will fall away. And in their place, something rare begins to grow, a life that reflects your actual self. This reflection is not curated. It is not packaged. It is lived. And to live in this way, you must constantly return to your inner compass. Alignment is not a one-time achievement. It's a way of being, a practice, a discipline. You must get quiet often. You must listen deeply. You must ask, is this choice mine? Does it reflect the truth I've uncovered? Or is it a reflex from an old story? Each time you act in alignment, you rewire that story. You interrupt the pattern. You declare, not with words but with presence, I will no longer abandon myself to belong, to succeed, or to be understood. This declaration doesn't always make life easier, but it makes life real. You will no longer be weighed down by contradiction, by saying one thing and doing another, by living for others while starving your own soul. The weight lifts not because your circumstances change overnight, but because you're no longer dragging a version of yourself that doesn't fit. This is freedom, not escape, not fantasy, but a kind of sovereignty born from inner coherence. In aligned action, you stop trying to control outcomes. You start trusting the process. You become less concerned with what people think and more attuned to what your life feels like from the inside. And that shift from perception to experience is where personal power takes root. Action is not just what you do, it's who you become through what you choose. Each decision is a thread in the tapestry of your character. When you begin to live in alignment, that tapestry starts to reflect your truth, not your fears, not your conditioning, not your environment's demands, but your essential self. This is not an easy path. It is often the road with fewer cheers, fewer guarantees, fewer guideposts, but it is the path that leads somewhere real, because it is carved with your own hands. Step by deliberate step. There will be days when you falter, when you take a familiar detour back into old habits, when alignment feels distant and disconnection tempts you to retreat. Do not punish yourself for these moments. They are not failures. They are feedback. Every misstep is an invitation, not to judge, but to return. Returning is the essence of this practice. You will not always act perfectly in line with your values. You will have blind spots. But as long as you are willing to return, again and again, to what feels true, you will not lose yourself. You will evolve with precision and grace. You will learn the difference between perfection and progress, between movement and motion, between distraction and direction. One of the most misunderstood truths about action is this: it is never neutral. Everything you do is either reinforcing your alignment or compromising it. Every word you speak, every boundary you set or don't, every commitment you honor or betray, they all ripple outward. They shape not only how the world sees you, but how you see yourself. And over time, that self-perception becomes your lived reality. This is why aligned action matters, not because of external outcomes, but because of internal integrity. You can lie to the world and get away with it, but you cannot lie to yourself without cost. The longer you act against your knowing, the more you fracture inside. The more you compromise what's essential, the more you erode your own power. But when you move with integrity, when your life and your truth match, you feel it in your body, in the ease of your breath, in the steadiness of your thoughts, in the silence that no longer feels empty, but full. You begin to realize that momentum doesn't have to be loud, it doesn't have to be fast, it just has to be true. So as this chapter closes, ask yourself not what you need to do, but who you're becoming through what you choose. Ask not just if your goals are ambitious, but if they're aligned. Ask not if your relationships are convenient, but if they're honest. Ask not if your life looks successful, but if it feels like yours. In the next chapter, we'll explore what it means to protect that feeling, to build boundaries not as walls, but as containers for what you value most. Because once you begin acting from alignment, the next step is clear. Protect the space where that alignment lives. Chapter 6. Guarding the sacred. Once you've tasted the clarity that comes from living in alignment, you realize how fragile it can be, how easily it's diluted by noise, drained by demands, or distorted by the expectations of others. That clarity, that inner coherence becomes sacred, and like anything sacred, it must be protected. This is where boundaries begin, not as rules to keep people out, but as commitments to keep yourself in. Most people misunderstand boundaries. They imagine them as ultimatums or confrontations. But boundaries are not about others. They are about you, about the energy you're willing to invest, the behaviors you will accept, and the environments you allow to shape you. A boundary says, "This is who I am, and this is how I choose to exist." To live without boundaries is to leave your life open to intrusion. It is to hand over authorship of your time, your attention, your emotional landscape. Without boundaries, you become reactive, depleted, unstable, not because you're weak, but because your inner world is constantly being interrupted. And so guarding the sacred is not selfish. It is a necessity. Think of the moments when you felt most alive, most clear, most connected. What conditions made that possible? Was it silence, space, honesty, presence? Now ask, how often do I protect those conditions in my daily life? Or do I sacrifice them to maintain peace, avoid conflict, or appear agreeable? This chapter is an invitation to stop apologizing for what keeps you well. It begins by observing where your energy leaks, not just in tasks or time, but in attention. Who drains you without offering anything real in return? What obligations leave you feeling fragmented? What conversations do you replay in your head because you said yes when your whole body meant no? These are not minor inconveniences, they are fractures in your foundation, and every time you override them, you teach yourself that your peace is negotiable. But it's not. Not anymore. Your peace is the soil in which everything real in your life will grow. And if you do not protect it, you will build on instability. You will create from tension. You will serve from depletion. You will connect from resentment. That's not alignment. That's survival in disguise. Boundaries are how you move from survival to sovereignty, from being shaped to becoming the shaper. They are not harsh. They are not rigid. They are honest, intentional, and clear. And most importantly, they are kind, not just to others, but to yourself. Boundaries are not about force, they're about clarity. They don't need to be loud to be effective. In fact, the most powerful boundaries are often unspoken, not because they're hidden, but because they are embodied. They live in how you move, how you respond, what you tolerate, and where you place your attention. The clearest boundary you'll ever set is how you live your life. If you want others to respect your time, start respecting it yourself. If you want others to treat you with presence, stop engaging in places where you are met with absence. If you want others to honor your energy, begin by noticing where you abandon it. This is the heart of it. Every boundary begins with you. You do not need to become defensive or aggressive. You do not need to convince anyone of your worth. You need only to define what is sacred to you and act in a way that honors it. That act alone will begin to repel what misaligns and attract what aligns. People who benefit from your lack of boundaries may resist your shift. They may question your sudden silence. They may label you as difficult, distant, or selfish. Let them. Their discomfort is not your burden to carry. It is the cost of your clarity. There is no requirement to explain your internal peace to someone committed to chaos. Let your boundary be your signal. Let your absence speak where your presence was once exploited. Let your refusal to participate in misalignment be a mirror for those still avoiding their own truth. This process is not about rejection. It's about recalibration. You are not cutting people off. You are cutting yourself free. Free from the need to please at the expense of your own wellness. Free from the narratives that say love must always mean sacrifice. Free from the expectation that you must dilute yourself to be digestible. There is a profound shift that happens when you no longer fear the consequences of your own alignment. You stop shrinking. You stop chasing. You stop tolerating the erosion of your spirit in the name of diplomacy. Instead, you stand firm. not in opposition, but in self-honoring. And that firmness, that quiet refusal to betray yourself becomes your compass. It guides your decisions. It filters your relationships. It protects the inner sanctuary you've worked so hard to reclaim. You begin to realize that boundaries aren't separation, they are connection in its most honest form. Because only through truth can real intimacy exist. Only through limits can freedom be sustained. Only through self-respect can mutual respect emerge. You are not here to convince. You are here to live clearly. And in that clarity, everything begins to realign. Living with boundaries is not about building walls, it's about becoming the wall. Not in the sense of separation, but in the sense of structure. You become a living reminder of what you allow and what you don't, of what holds and what falls away. You become the shape your life conforms to, not the shape your life gets distorted by. When you hold a boundary, you are holding a line between what serves your growth and what stunts it. This line is not always clear at first. It takes practice to distinguish discomfort that signals expansion from discomfort that signals violation. One sharpens you, the other drains you, and only through experience will you develop the discernment to know the difference. That discernment is the result of stillness, not reaction. Reaction says, never again. Stillness asks, what does this moment require of me? From that stillness you respond, not from pain but from presence. Not to punish, but to protect. That is the mark of someone who is no longer acting from wound but from wisdom. Boundaries are not armor. They are agreements with yourself first and foremost. You agree to honor your energy. You agree to honor your time. You agree to hold space only where reciprocity is possible. These agreements don't make you rigid, they make you reliable. Because the more you respect your own limits, the more deeply others can trust your presence. And here lies a deeper truth. Boundaries are an act of love. Love not just for yourself but for the quality of connection you invite. Boundaries do not reject, they refine. They create the conditions where intimacy can flourish, because intimacy cannot survive in an environment of silent resentment. It cannot grow in the soil of self-abandonment. It needs oxygen, honesty, choice. So you draw the line, not to control but to cultivate. You hold the line, not to isolate, but to clarify. You live the line, not to dominate but to define who you are and how you move. And this act repeated over time reshapes your life. It simplifies what once felt chaotic. It silences what once felt loud. It strengthens what once felt fragile. Because now you know your peace is not up for negotiation. Your energy is not a limitless resource. Your truth is not a suggestion. You've seen what happens when you betray yourself for acceptance. You've felt the cost of silence, the weight of pretending. And now you are choosing differently. Not out of bitterness but out of reverence. Reverence for your own life. For the stillness you've cultivated. For the clarity you've fought to earn. And for the future you're shaping. One aligned action. One honest no. One unwavering yes at a time. In the next chapter, you begin to move from protection to connection. Because once you've built a foundation rooted in clarity, the next evolution is opening, with discernment, with trust, and with full presence, and with full. Chapter 7. Connection without compromise. True connection does not require self-erasure. It does not ask you to shrink, edit, or perform. It asks only that you show up fully and allow others to do the same. But to arrive in that kind of space, you must first unlearn the belief that intimacy and authenticity are at odds. They are not. The only intimacy worth having is built on truth. Anything else is choreography. You dance around the discomfort, speak in scripts, Agree to keep the peace while something sacred inside you grows silent. This is the kind of connection most people are taught to accept. One that prioritizes harmony over honesty. One that equates love with endurance, not expansion. But endurance without expression becomes emotional exile. You become present in body, but absent in essence. To connect without compromise, you must first believe that your truth is not too much, that your clarity is not cruelty, that your standards are not selfish. This requires a reorientation away from people-pleasing and toward presence, away from performance and into participation. Because real connection demands that you bring your whole self to the table, not just the parts that are easy to digest. And here's the paradox. When you stop hiding, you start attracting. Not everyone will stay. Not everyone will understand. But the ones who do, who meet your truth with presence instead of defensiveness, those are the ones worth building with. Those are the connections that nourish rather than deplete, that expand rather than confine. Connection is not about sameness, it's about safety. Can you be fully seen and still feel held? Can you speak your truth and remain in dialogue, not conflict? Can you ask for what you need without fearing rejection? These are the measures of meaningful intimacy, but they require practice. You will have to get comfortable with discomfort, with awkward conversations, with pauses that don't resolve immediately, with emotions that swell before they settle, and most of all, with the vulnerability of being known. You cannot control how others receive your truth, but you can choose to stop betraying it. Every time you choose to speak clearly instead of strategically, you build a bridge. Every time you ask a real question instead of playing a role, you invite depth. Every time you sit in silence instead of filling space with falseness, you open the door to connection that heals. This chapter is about building that kind of connection, one where you no longer have to choose between love and self-respect, where the most radical thing you can offer is not your compliance, but your presence. When you begin to show up fully, something subtle but powerful shifts in your relationships. The masks start to drop, not just yours but theirs. Your presence becomes permission. Your honesty becomes an invitation. People around you begin to recognize that truth is possible here, that hiding is no longer necessary. This is the quiet power of living in alignment. It changes the room without saying a word. But this kind of connection does not come without cost. It will ask you to give up the illusions that once made you feel safe. The illusion that if you manage others' emotions, you'll be loved. The illusion that if you stay silent, you'll be accepted. The illusion that vulnerability makes you weak. Real intimacy dismantles these myths. It doesn't ask you to be perfect. It asks you to be real. To share when you're uncertain, to admit when you're afraid, to own your needs without shame, and to meet others with the same compassion you are learning to extend to yourself. But compassion is not indulgence. It is clarity with kindness. It is saying this is what I need, without aggression, and this is what I cannot accept, without guilt. It is making space for another's experience, without abandoning your own. This balance is delicate, and it must be practiced. You will be tempted to retreat when you feel misunderstood. You will want to over-explain when someone pushes back. You might even feel the urge to dim yourself down to keep things comfortable. These moments are tests, not of your worth, but of your resolve. Can you stay rooted in your truth when the room shifts? Can you remain open without collapsing into appeasement? Because here's the truth. Connection is not sustained by agreement. It's sustained by mutual respect. And respect grows when truth is met with steadiness, not strategy. When you can say, "This is who I am," and leave space for others to meet you, without chasing, without convincing, without folding. The depth of a relationship is measured not by how well you avoid conflict, but by how you navigate it. Can you remain kind and honest in discomfort? Can you hold your line without hardening? Can you listen without disappearing? These questions are the scaffolding of meaningful connection, and through them you begin to experience a rare kind of intimacy, not built on fantasy, but on truth. Not on agreement, but on resonance. Not on performance, but on presence. This is the kind of connection that heals the nervous system, that quiets the inner critic, that makes you feel safe without shrinking, seen without shape-shifting. You're not here to be universally understood. You're here to be fully yourself and to meet others doing the same. You don't need more connection. You need better connection, deeper, truer, rooted in something more honest than politeness and more durable than compatibility. What you need is a kind of connection that allows you to breathe freely while still being fully seen. This kind of connection is not built by accident. It is cultivated through courage, through discomfort, through the slow, sacred act of revealing yourself. It begins with choosing presence over performance, listening not to reply, but to understand, speaking not to control, but to be known. It asks that you stop managing how others perceive you and start focusing on how authentically you are expressing yourself. This shift is subtle, but everything changes when you make it. You stop measuring the quality of a relationship by how often you're praised and start noticing how deeply you're respected. You stop needing to be liked and start needing to be understood. You stop trading parts of yourself for affection and start realizing that any love requiring your absence is not love at all. And as you anchor deeper into your truth, you become more available, not less. More compassionate, because you are no longer negotiating your worth. More generous, because your energy isn't spent on pretending. More intimate, because you are no longer hiding. You begin to realize that boundaries don't create distance, they create safety. That vulnerability isn't weakness, it's trust made visible. That conflict, when navigated with clarity and respect, is not the end of connection, but the beginning of a more honest one. Not every relationship will make it through this evolution. Some were built on versions of you that no longer exist. Some thrived in the absence of your truth. And as you begin to show up fully, those connections may fade, fracture, or fall away. Let them. You are not losing people. You are losing patterns, patterns that once required you to abandon yourself to stay connected. Now you are choosing to stay with yourself first. And from that place, you will draw in those who can meet you as you are, not as you've been trained to be. Because here's the most radical truth of all. You do not have to sacrifice who you are to be loved. In fact, the more you honor your truth, the more love you make room for, not the shallow kind that clings to comfort, but the deep kind that can withstand your fullness. As this chapter ends, carry this with you: connection without compromise is not just possible, it is essential. And it begins the moment you stop choosing harmony over wholeness. In the next chapter, we'll explore what it means to embody everything you've uncovered, not just in thought or intention, but in the way you show up in the world every single day. Because alignment isn't something you visit, it's something you live. Chapter 8. Living the alignment. You've done the reflection. You've stripped away the noise, reclaimed your voice, and drawn the lines that protect your inner clarity. But insight, no matter how powerful, is inert without embodiment. Real transformation begins when your inner truth becomes your outer rhythm. Living in alignment is not a decision you make once. It's a commitment you renew every day. It shows up in how you start your morning. Do you rush into urgency or begin with presence? It shows up in how you speak. Do your words echo your values, or do they mask your truth for comfort? It shows up in your choices. Do they reflect who you are, or who you're afraid not to be? This isn't about rigidity, it's about congruence. Congruence is when your life feels like a single voice, instead of a collection of conflicting signals. It's when your actions, your boundaries, your goals, and your relationships all point in the same direction. That direction doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be yours. And here's the real power. Once alignment becomes a habit, not just an idea, you move differently. You stop second-guessing every word because you trust your tone. You stop chasing validation because you trust your values. You stop fearing silence because your presence feels enough. Life doesn't become easier, but it becomes clearer. And in that clarity, you find ease. Living the alignment doesn't require grand gestures. It requires subtle honesty. It's in saying no without guilt. It's in choosing rest over proving your worth. It's in reaching out without expectation. It's in pausing before you react, breathing before you decide, and asking yourself not what will they think, but what is true for me right now. This lifestyle builds momentum, because each time you act in alignment, the gap between who you are and how you live gets smaller. You stop performing, you start embodying, you begin to feel solid. Not because everything is figured out, but because your choices echo your essence. And when that happens, people feel it. They may not always understand it, but they feel it. Your presence becomes a reflection of your practice, a living, breathing testament to your truth. This is not about being unshakable. It's about returning quickly when you're shaken. Because alignment doesn't protect you from life's friction. It gives you the tools to navigate it without fracturing. So ask yourself, where am I still pretending? Where am I still performing? Where have I settled into awareness, but stopped short of action? These aren't questions for judgment. They are doorways into deeper consistency, into honest embodiment, into a life where truth isn't just spoken, it's lived. Living in alignment will often feel unremarkable, not because it lacks power, but because it lacks drama. You won't need to explain yourself as much. You won't feel the urge to prove. You'll move more quietly, but with far more certainty. This is the paradox of integrity. It's loud on the inside and silent on the outside. When you begin to live from this place, it doesn't mean life stops testing you. In fact, your clarity will attract situations that challenge your consistency. People, moments, and opportunities will arise that offer you a tempting return to your old scripts. Not because you're failing, but because you're refining. Every invitation to misalignment is a reminder you've evolved. Choose accordingly. You may be offered recognition for something that no longer resonates. You may be asked to compromise your values in the name of progress. You may be pulled into dynamics that once felt familiar, but now feel off-key. These are not distractions, they are checkpoints. Do you still choose yourself when choosing yourself costs you comfort? That's the real measure of alignment, not in ease but in tension. Can you remain still when urgency demands reaction? Can you remain soft when resistance demands defense? Can you walk away without resentment when the door leads back to a version of you that no longer fits? This is not about becoming untouchable. It's about becoming trustworthy to yourself. You learn to trust your boundaries, not because they're rigid, but because they're rooted. You learn to trust your emotions, not because they're always right, but because they're signals. You learn to trust your voice, Not because it's always easy to use, but because you've seen what happens when you silence it. That trust becomes your compass. And with it, something begins to shift. You stop waiting for clarity to make decisions. You realize clarity comes from making decisions. You stop waiting for confidence before taking the next step. You realize confidence is a byproduct of movement. You don't need to know the whole path. You need to know your next honest move. And as you make those moves slow, clear, intentional, you begin to see alignment is not about perfection. It's about proximity, staying close to your truth, even when the world pulls, even when fear whispers, even when doubt visits. You stop striving to feel whole and start honoring what's already whole within you. This is the essence of living the alignment: to move, to speak, to rest, to engage from a place that's not reaching, but returning, over and over again, quietly, boldly, consistently. That's the rhythm of a life lived in truth. Sustainable transformation isn't built in bursts. It's built in rhythm, not in declarations, but in decisions, not in grand reinventions, but in small, consistent actions that no longer betray your values. This is what alignment looks like in real life. It's in how you begin your mornings. It's in what you say yes to without hesitation, and what you decline without guilt. It's in the boundaries you uphold when no one is watching. It's in the gentle but unwavering way you return to yourself, again and again, no matter how far you drift. You begin to live like someone who trusts their path, not because it's easy, but because it's yours. There will be days when you feel off track, when old fears creep in and new pressures pull at you. That's not failure. That's part of the human experience. The goal isn't to be perfectly aligned every moment. The goal is to notice when you're not, and return with grace. And the more you practice, the shorter the distance between drift and return becomes. You learn to spot the subtle signals, the conversation that leaves you unsettled, the opportunity that doesn't sit quite right, the task you keep delaying because it contradicts your deeper direction. You no longer bulldoze through these signs. You listen, you respond, you realign, because now you understand your time is not a resource to be exploited. Your energy is not a currency to be spent pleasing others. Your presence is not a product. It's a gift. And living in alignment means treating it that way. You begin to surround yourself with things that support your clarity. People who reflect your truth, not your performance. Environments that invite your calm, not your chaos. Work that activates your creativity, not your compensation for self-worth. Everything becomes more intentional. And in that intentionality, life slows down, but becomes fuller. Each moment carries more weight. Each choice holds more depth. Each day becomes a quiet declaration: I am living what I know to be true. This doesn't mean life becomes simple. It means your relationship to it does. You stop chasing certainty. You begin cultivating presence. You stop performing for approval. You begin honoring your authenticity. You stop managing perception. You begin nurturing reality. This is the shift from surviving to choosing, from reacting to responding, from drifting to leading. You don't need applause for this. You'll feel it in your breath, in your body, in your body, in your sleep, in the silence that used to scare you and now feels like home. In the next chapter we explore how to sustain this presence, not just in practice but in pressure. Because alignment isn't a state to visit when life is calm. It's a way of moving through challenge with integrity intact. Chapter 9. Grace under pressure. It's easy to feel aligned when the world is quiet. When there are no demands pulling at your focus, no crises bending your boundaries, no unexpected changes shaking your sense of direction. But alignment isn't measured in calm, it's revealed in pressure. How you show up when everything tightens is who you are becoming. Pressure has a way of stripping away performance. It exposes what's real. Your beliefs, your tendencies, your instincts all rise to the surface. When life compresses, there's no room for pretense. There's only reaction or response. The difference between the two is presence. Reaction is reflex. It comes from the past. It's patterned, emotional, fast. It says, survive now, ask questions later. But response is born from awareness. It pauses, it breathes, it chooses. And most importantly, it protects alignment in the moments when it's easiest to abandon. Grace under pressure is not about staying calm all the time. It's about staying clear. It's about recognizing when fear is speaking louder than truth, when urgency is masquerading as importance, when someone else's storm is entering your emotional space uninvited. Living with grace means remembering that alignment is not the same as stillness. It's the ability to move deliberately, even in chaos. This doesn't mean you don't feel. It doesn't mean you don't react. It means you notice. You catch the moment your voice begins to rise, your chest begins to tighten, your decisions begin to slip from clarity into reactivity. And then you return. Return to breath. Return to boundaries. Return to what you've learned to trust when nothing else feels stable, your own truth. Pressure will test the edges of that truth. It will ask, do you really believe what you say you believe? Will you still honor your needs when the cost is discomfort? Will you still protect your peace when others are unraveling? These are not moral questions. They are practical ones. Because the more you protect your alignment under pressure, the more trustworthy your presence becomes, not just to others but to yourself. You stop seeing conflict as threat. You start seeing it as clarity. You stop collapsing under urgency. You start slowing down with intention. You stop abandoning your values for convenience. You start honoring them like anchors. This is what grace looks like. Not perfection, not control, just presence intact. When it matters most, pressure doesn't just test your alignment, it refines it. It reveals the parts of you that still cling to control, the reflexes that surface when you're afraid, the voices that speak loudest when you're stretched thin. In that sense, pressure is a mirror, not to shame you but to show you. What it reflects is not weakness. What it reflects is what's still unfinished, still learning, still integrating. And there is power in that knowledge. You don't rise under pressure by becoming harder. You rise by becoming more precise, softer in your presence, sharper in your boundaries. Less reactive, more aware. You begin to see that grace is not a posture, it's a practice. One made visible in the moments you choose clarity over chaos, composure over control. Grace does not mean passivity. It means choosing your tone when everything inside wants to shout. It means holding your boundary without needing to weaponize it. It means knowing when to speak and when silence will serve better. It is the ability to pause, not because you're unsure, but because you're intentional. The space between trigger and action, that's where your evolution lives. Pressure invites you into that space. It doesn't demand a perfect version of you. It asks for a real one. The kind of version that can be steady while still uncertain, tender while still strong, honest without being harsh, present even while uncomfortable. That's where self-leadership begins. You are no longer waiting for life to calm down before you return to yourself. You return to yourself inside the storm. You build rituals that stabilize you when nothing around you is stable. You build language that de-escalates instead of escalates. You learn how to self-soothe, not to numb but to stay connected. Because pressure is inevitable. Reaction is optional. You begin to train yourself to hold tension without folding, to stay rooted when others lose their center, to notice when you're leaving alignment and guide yourself back gently, without shame. That act of self-guidance is the essence of grace. It is the difference between collapsing under life and rising through it. You are not avoiding challenge. You're learning how to move through it with integrity intact. And that integrity begins to infuse everything you do. How you lead, how you love, how you move in rooms that once intimidated you, how you speak to yourself in moments of mistake or mess. This is what grace under pressure teaches you, how to carry your alignment, not just as a concept, but as a way of being. Even when things break, even when nothing is certain, even when your own voice trembles. Especially then, the true measure of alignment isn't how you feel when everything flows, it's how you hold yourself when nothing does. In discomfort, your integrity is either reinforced or revealed as conditional. Pressure makes it clear. Are your principles steady enough to stand when tested? Grace under pressure is not about winning. It's about staying honest, staying present, staying with your values when every instinct wants to revert. When chaos arrives, most people regress. They reach for familiar scripts. They fall back on roles that no longer fit, the fixer, the pleaser, the avoider, the controller. But this work you've done, this practice of alignment has prepared you to choose something different, to pause, to notice, to respond, not just react, to say, yes, this is hard, and I will still choose my values, because that's where growth lives. Not in the absence of challenge, but in the precision of your response to it. You begin to see the world differently. Challenges become tests of presence, not punishments. Conflict becomes a space for clarity, not destruction. Even uncertainty becomes a practice ground for self-trust. The world does not need more people who are perfect under pressure. It needs more people who are honest under pressure, who can admit, this is difficult, and still show up with clarity. Who can say, I don't know yet, and still move forward without abandoning themselves. Grace is not about composure that suppresses. It's about composure that includes your fear, your doubt, your confusion. They don't disqualify you. They humanize you. Grace allows you to hold them without being held by them. And when you do, something remarkable happens. You become more trustworthy, not because you have all the answers, but because you are not pretending to. Others begin to feel safe around you, not because you're unshakable, but because you're honest about your shaking. And your willingness to stay, to breathe, to choose alignment anyway, that creates a kind of gravity. You become the steady point others can orient to, not because you're above the storm, but because you've learned how to be inside it without losing yourself. This is what leadership really means. Not titles, not control, but presence that holds form when form is tested. Words that still tell the truth when truth is inconvenient. Boundaries that hold their shape even when pushed. And love, yes, love, that doesn't demand agreement, only honesty. As this chapter closes, carry this with you. You are not here to escape pressure. You are here to become someone who remains clear within it, who can still act with integrity, speak with honesty, lead with presence. In the next chapter, we explore how to move forward from this place, not with urgency, but with quiet, rooted momentum. Because now you are not just aligned. You are anchored. You are anchored. Chapter 10. Momentum with Meaning. Chapter 10. Momentum with Meaning. There's a kind of momentum that builds in silence. It doesn't roar. It doesn't announce itself. It gathers quietly in the space where alignment and consistency meet. This is not the momentum of urgency. It's not powered by pressure or fueled by fear. It's momentum with meaning, steady, clear, self-generated. You've spent time stripping away the noise. You've returned to your core, practiced boundaries, embodied your truth, and learned to remain whole under pressure. Now comes the final piece, forward movement. But not the kind you used to chase. This is movement that flows with you, not away from you. Most people equate progress with speed, with hustle, with expansion that can be seen and measured. But what if true progress isn't about going faster or doing more? What if it's about moving in a way that keeps your integrity intact? That's where meaning enters. When each action reflects your values, when each step carries the weight of your awareness, when the direction you choose honors both where you've been and where you want to go. You don't need to sprint. You need to move in rhythm with your truth. And that rhythm might look different now. It might be slower than others expect, more intentional, more selective. You'll say no more often. You'll seek depth over volume. You'll prioritize internal success over external metrics. That shift might confuse people. Let it. Your life isn't a performance. It's a pattern of choice. And meaning is the pattern left behind by 1,000 small decisions that all say the same thing. I will not abandon myself, not for progress, not for people, not for applause. Momentum with meaning is not linear. It curves, it pauses, it breathes, but it never forgets where it's going, because it's not moving to escape, it's moving to embody. It's movement born of integration, of becoming whole, then acting from that wholeness. This is the kind of momentum that creates real change, not just in your own life, but in the lives around you, because people don't follow speed, they follow substance. And when your movement reflects substance, it speaks louder than any plan, louder than any presentation. So you begin again, not with a grand gesture, but with a grounded choice. You ask, what matters right now? And then you move, with clarity, with care, with meaning, because you are not just going somewhere. You are becoming someone, one aligned step at a time. Sustainable progress is not about force, it's about flow, and flow only happens when your movement matches your inner truth. Anything faster will fracture you. Anything slower will dull your edge. Meaningful momentum is found in that space where clarity and action meet, not to impress but to express. This isn't about motivation. Motivation is fleeting. It relies on mood, on momentum from the outside, on dopamine hits and temporary hype. But meaning, that's internal fuel. Meaning doesn't fade when you're tired. It doesn't vanish when the spotlight turns off. Meaning is what pulls you forward when nothing else does. And that's what you need now. Not more noise, not more urgency, just the next right action, small, clean, aligned. Maybe it's sending a message you've been avoiding. Maybe it's taking a step back to rest. Maybe it's beginning a project, not because it's profitable, but because it's necessary for your soul. The size doesn't matter. The sincerity does. When you act from sincerity, your life begins to mirror your inner landscape. Things align, not all at once, not always visibly, but inevitably. You attract what resonates. You release what no longer fits. And most importantly, you stop betraying yourself in pursuit of false progress. This shift can feel like solitude, like slowness, like stepping off a path that once gave you a sense of belonging. But what you're gaining now is something far more precious than approval. Self-direction. You're not waiting for the world to catch up. You're not asking for permission to evolve. You're moving, not to be seen, but because you've seen yourself clearly. And once that happens, you can't go back. You stop chasing milestones that don't matter. You stop comparing your pace to others. You stop building a life for the sake of optics and begin shaping one that reflects your values, your vision, your version of wholeness. That's the real success, when your inner world and outer world begin to match. It's not about perfection, it's about coherence. When your thoughts, words, and actions line up, something shifts in your nervous system. Peace isn't something you seek, it's something you carry. Confidence isn't something you display, it's something you embody. And from that place you create momentum that doesn't just move you, it moves everything around you. Not through pressure, through presence. Not through intensity, through intention. Not through noise, through quiet, relentless truth. This is your power now, not in how loudly you move, but in how clearly. You are no longer becoming. You are arriving again and again. With each moment you choose integrity over impulse, clarity over chaos, alignment over approval. This is not the end of a journey. It's the beginning of a new way of existing, rooted, real, responsive. Momentum with meaning is not a sprint. It's not about how far you go, but how honestly you travel. It's a rhythm you feel in your bones, a subtle propulsion not driven by fear but by purpose. It asks for nothing loud. It demands no applause. It simply asks, will you keep showing up? Not as the ideal, not as the expert, not as the perfected self, but as the consistent one, the one who continues to return. You return to stillness when the noise rises. You return to truth when doubt creeps in. You return to choice when old patterns try to dictate your path. And in that return, again and again, you reclaim your power. You are not here to be everything for everyone. You are here to be something deeply true, to stand as an example of what alignment looks like when lived, not just spoken. Your life becomes the evidence, not of perfection, but of integrity in motion. You will forget, you will drift, you will get tired. That's not failure, that's the cycle. But now you know the way back, and that knowing is your compass. The return becomes quicker. The inner recentering becomes instinct, and from that center, everything becomes possible. You've learned how to unlearn. You've rebuilt your life from the core. You've moved into your truth, protected your clarity, practiced connection without compromise, and stood in presence under pressure. Now you carry all of it forward, not as weight, but as wisdom. And this is the final lesson. You don't need a map. You've become the direction, the quiet knowing that what you're building matters, the inner nod that tells you when something's off, the rising breath that grounds you before you speak, the invisible shift that happens when your outer life finally echoes your inner clarity. That's the path now. You don't need to rush. You just need to continue. Because momentum with meaning doesn't chase, it draws. It doesn't prove, it reveals. It doesn't grasp, it gives. And in giving your presence fully to the life you're choosing to build, you fulfill what no outside force ever could. You belong, here, now, as you are. And from this point forward, every step is an act of remembering and a continuation of becoming more deeply, undeniably, and unapologetically. Conclusion: the echo of truth. There is a quiet revolution in choosing to know yourself, not to fix, to prove, or to perform, but simply to become aware, to return again and again to your own center, to live, not in reaction to life, but in rhythm with your truth. What you've done through these chapters is more than listen. You've remembered. You've remembered the voice beneath the noise, the clarity beneath the confusion, the strength beneath the survival. This is not the end of a journey. It's the beginning of a new relationship with yourself. One where you no longer need permission to be whole. One where your worth is no longer conditional. One where your presence is rooted in clarity, not consensus. You now carry tools that no one can take from you. The power to pause before you react. The courage to say no without guilt. The clarity to act without compromise. The wisdom to rest without shame. You've learned that alignment is not a destination. It's a way of moving. That truth doesn't always roar. It often whispers. That your boundaries are not barriers, but bridges to real connection. And that your life doesn't have to impress to matter. It only has to feel honest. As you walk forward, know this: you are allowed to evolve. You are allowed to change your mind, shift your pace, and redefine what success means to you. Growth is not linear, healing is not clean, and presence is not perfection. But if you keep returning softly, steadily, intentionally, then you're doing the work. There is nothing more radical, more rebellious, or more beautiful than becoming fully, deeply, unapologetically you. So carry what resonates, release what doesn't, and remember the depth you seek is already within you. You are not becoming, you are arriving. If you found this content enriching and valuable, we would be deeply grateful if you could express your appreciation through liking and subscribing. Your support is incredibly meaningful and enables us to continue creating content that resonates with you. For those who think this is a great gift for yourself or for your loved ones, you can find the link in the description.